Gützeyo, Gützeyo. Didn't how much you with you? Didn't how much you with you?
The display of our minds reminds me of thousands of broken dreams. Towering fear controls the soul of midnight. Afraid of the touch, we are victimized. We got no choice.
Yo y la realidad, sí que era la primera vez. Todo contra todo. Todo está bien. Tú compras los medicamentos. Tú compras los medicamentos.
The display of our minds reminds me of thousands of broken dreams. Afraid of the touch, we are victimized. We got no choice. The Pacific of peace and freedom has died.
really wonderful to be here and see such a big crowd. Thank you to the Harvard Bookstore, Mass Humanities, and also the Cambridge Public Library. I can't think of a more appropriate place to discuss the current state of our democracy in a free public library. So it's really great to be here. So Steve and I are going to kind of tag team tonight. I'm going to start off and then hand things over to Steve. And what we're going to do tonight is talk about the motivation behind our book and some of the things we've learned while working on this book. So I want to begin really first just by talking about the motivations that led to this project. So we both teach in the Harvard Government Department. We're colleagues. We've taught together and researched together for 15 years. We study democracy in crisis and authoritarianism in other parts of the world. This is what we've spent our careers doing. But we were motivated to write this book because Steve and I, like many of you perhaps, watched the 2015-2016 presidential election, first with a kind of sense of uneasiness, growing disbelief, and eventually shock at the tenor of political debate. But since we have spent our careers studying democracies in crisis in other countries, me in Europe and Latin in the 19th and 20th century, Steve in Latin America, the 1960s to the present, there was another layer of trepidation. At first, it was really just small echoes. We saw during the presidential election the Republican nominee rail against the media, threaten to not accept the results of elections, accuse his political rival of being a criminal, threatening to lock up his former rival if elected, and finally condoning violence of political rivals. So many people thought these were words, in some sense they were. But Steve and I were both increasingly nervous because we recognized that these were really hallmarks, these four things that happened during the presidential election, going after the media, talking about elections in this way, criticizing a rival in this way, condoning violence. These were hallmarks of authoritarians in other countries. And moreover, no major presidential party candidate in the United States, in at least the 20th century, but even longer, had ever done any of these things, had ever behaved this way. But many candidates we recognized for political office in other countries who eventually became authoritarian leaders had behaved this way. So both of us had this uncanny feeling that we had seen this movie before, elsewhere, and it rarely ends well. So we decided we had to write this book. We wanted to draw upon the knowledge we have of other countries and other experiences to look at democracies that have confronted crises and then overcome these crises, and other places where countries have confronted these kinds of crises and succumbed to these crises, to draw lessons from these experiences, to try to understand our own country's predicament. So while working on the book, we came to some conclusions that differ, I think, from how many today think about the Trump presidency. We came to realize the problem facing our political system today is not just Donald Trump alone. It's not just his outrageous comments, his confusing or unusual psychology. It's tempting to focus on the most outrageous latest tweet or political gossip. But at some level, we realize this is a distraction. It's important to keep your eye on the ball. At the end of the day, we came to realize, as we worked on this book, that Donald Trump was not just a cause of our political system's problems. He was in many ways a symptom. He was a symptom of deeper underlying problems in our political system. We realized, in short, that the problem runs deeper than Trump. So tonight, what we're going to do is talk about 3 discoveries we made in the process of writing our book that led us to this conclusion that the problem runs deeper than Trump. I'm going to first start off by talking about the first discovery. Steve will talk about the second and third. Okay, so discovery number 1. The best way to stop authoritarians is to prevent them from coming to power in the first place. Okay, what does this mean? Well, in the context of the United States, this means we have to pay attention to not just why Donald Trump was elected, but also how he ever came to be the nominee of a major political party in the first place. So let me elaborate. In the Cold War, 3/4 of democratic breakdowns around the world happened at the hands of men with guns in the form of military coups. Since the collapse of communism, the world has changed, and most democratic breakdowns arrive at the ballot box through elections. Demagogues come to power through elections, and once in power, they inflict serious damage on democratic political institutions. So really a grave paradox facing democracies today is how does a democracy prevent an autocratic-minded demagogue from coming into power and then dismantling those democratic institutions that brought him into power in the first place? Now, throughout most of American history, we've happily avoided this paradox. But it was not because there were no demagogues, and it's not because there weren't voters who might support demagogues. In fact, we really have a tendency, I think, to whitewash our own history and to forget there's really a continuous strand in American history of authoritarians who gain around 30% approval in opinion surveys. So this strand runs from Henry Ford in the 1920s, the founder of Ford Motor Company, who was a famous anti-Semite, who was cited positively in Mein Kampf, who considered running for president in the 1920s. Huey Long in the 1930s, Joe McCarthy in the 1950s, George Wallace in the 1960s. Gallup poll data really going back to the 1930s shows that each of these figures consistently garner around 30% approval ratings in public opinion surveys. And this is a number that really runs to today's support, 35% approval for our president. So I don't think it's actually too much to say that there's really a continuous, perhaps latent strand of authoritarianism running as a subcurrent in American political culture. In some ways, the United States is not unique. This probably applies to most countries. But here's really the point. None of these figures I just cited, Ford, Long, Wallace, none of these figures ever made it close to the presidency. Though they were popular, they were kept far from power. So how and what changed in 2016? So in the book, we emphasize 2 contributing factors, and I'm just going to kind of lay them out more schematically here. We lay this out in more detail, of course, in the book. What changed? First, the way we pick our presidents has changed. Until 1972, and for the first 3/4 of the 20th century, presidential candidates were selected by party leaders in a kind of system of gatekeeping, or what political scientists sometimes have called peer review, where political party leaders who worked up close with the candidates got together and selected the candidates. These were politicians who would get together, and this was criticized, of course, as the kind of smoke-filled back room. But these politicians had a big say in picking candidates. And so what this meant was that voters essentially were irrelevant at the stage of picking candidates. It was party leaders who picked candidates. Voters, of course, mattered in the general election, but it was party leaders who picked candidates. Now the system, the smoke-filled back room, certainly had downsides. It was exclusive. It wasn't very democratic. Sometimes generated mediocre candidates. If you know anything about Warren G. Harding, he's a kind of prototype of somebody who emerged out of the smoke-filled room who was maybe mediocre. But all systems have advantages and disadvantages. And the advantage of this system was that it worked well, in fact, perfectly, in keeping extremists from ever becoming viable candidates for president. It was a screening system, a filtration system, a gatekeeping system that effectively kept demagogues out. Now, we all know that the American political system and American society changed dramatically in 1968, the tragic year of 1968. The way we select our candidates also changed in 1968. The presidential system was opened up. The smoke-filled rooms were opened up. Primaries were made binding. Voters could now select the candidates for office. The general election was now preceded by the nearly continuous primary season that we all know that goes on for months and months and months, where the voters had a say in picking the candidates. Now, this certainly was a more open system, but it's interesting that there were two political scientists who wrote in the early 70s who warned that the fall of this filtration system could also open the door to demagogues. Now, to be clear, we don't advocate going back to that old system. But at the same time, we have to recognize that the current system is double-edged. It is more open, and so what this means is that if a demagogue ever runs for office, the road to nomination is much clearer. Now, it's also true that in the 1980s, the Democratic Party introduced a system of superdelegates, where elected officials held extra sway in the selection of candidates. This kind of contained some elements of the old system, creating a kind of more complicated obstacle course on the way to the nomination. But Republicans never adopted this system. They never adopted superdelegates. So the door was much more open. So this meant that if a demagogue ever decided to run for president, especially in the Republican Party, there was a much more open road to gain the nomination. And this is exactly what happened in 2016. Donald Trump, a modern-day demagogue, became the nominee of the Republican Party. So there's a second factor, though, that we also emphasize in the book, that prevents someone from that shapes whether someone with authoritarian tendencies can reach this kind of position of power to be a nominee and come into office. And in many ways, this second factor is the thing that we emphasize more and is more crucial. It's because, after all, Donald Trump won the nomination, but this didn't mean he was necessarily going to become president. First of all, Hillary Clinton could have beat him. But the second point that we emphasize in the book, just as importantly, was that it was absolutely imperative for the Republican Party to play a role there. There was an imperative role for Republican Party allies of Donald Trump to play. And here's really the central pivot of the story. Authoritarians come to power not just electoral authoritarians come to power not just via elections, but also with the enabling aid of establishment party allies. So throughout history, this repeats itself. Italy in the 1920s, Germany in the 1930s, Venezuela in the 1990s. This is really a crucial test. When a demagogue comes along who clearly violates democratic norms and gets close to power, one of the last off-ramps that determines is whether or not establishment politicians, party allies, finally break with the demagogue, with the autocrat in the making. They draw a line in the sand and say, beyond this we will not go. Or do they abdicate? Do they overlook the violations? Do they let party trump their commitment to democratic norms? And in effect, do they form a Faustian bargain, allowing their ideological ally, but an autocrat in the making, into power? Do they enable the authoritarian? Because when elected authorities get to power in this last stage, it's nearly always because mainstream politicians, out of miscalculation or opportunism, let them in the door. The enabling role of the Republican Party is actually not unique. This happens remarkably often. In Venezuela in the 1990s, Hugo Chavez got his political start by being given a big boost from a long-time mainstream fixture of Venezuelan politics, President Rafael Caldera, who freed Chavez from jail, gave Chavez a boost in legitimacy, and Caldera was hoping to kind of tap into some of the energy around Chavez. Caldera was an older politician. His time had passed, and within several years, Chavez was president, Caldera was gone. And even better examples, Italy in the 1920s, the early 1920s. Benito Mussolini was a complete outcast of the mainstream. But a long-standing prominent liberal politician, Giovanni Giletti, saw Mussolini on the horizon and decided to include him on his party list in the early 20s to tap into some of the energy on the far right. Within a year, Giletti was long gone. Mussolini was prime minister. In Weimar, Germany, a similar story unfolded. The leader of the German Conservative Party, kind of the head of a kind of very elitist, aristocratic party without a popular base, allied himself with Hitler in the late 20s, issued joint party programs, held rallies together, trying to draw on Hitler's grassroots appeal to try to shore up this relatively elitist party. But this backfired. The conservatives disintegrated. Hitler grew in prominence. By January 1933, he was in power, in this fateful moment in January 1933 when Hitler was named Chancellor. Franz von Papen, who was a leading statesman at the time, assured his conservative allies, "Don't worry." This is a quote. "Within 2 months, we'll have him into a corner, and he'll squeal."
But that's not necessary.
In every instance, the mainstream or the establishment politicians open the door, abdicate, fail in their gatekeeping function, and out of miscalculation or opportunism, let the extremist in the door. In every instance, the mainstream politicians make the same mistake. They kind of form this Faustian bargain, thinking they can contain the outsider. In every instance, the Faustian bargain backfires. So the same thing happened in the United States in 2016. Republicans enabled that. Many leading Republicans, even after candidate Trump won the nomination, who openly despised Trump and were offended by Trump, could have crossed party lines. They could have, but didn't, for example, endorse Hillary Clinton.
Take you to Disneyland.
They could have put democracy ahead of country, ahead of party.
Tons of cotton candy.
This could have made a difference.
And a big healing.
Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, how realistic is
But all
that?
that can wait.
Could that really happen? What if politicians really
Today
done
I'll
this?
buy you a .357
Well, it turns out we don't have to
Magnum.
look very far to
And
find
lots and
evidence
lots
that
of
this is
bullets.
possible. If you look to the
I'll buy you a stack of
2017
AK-47s
French presidential
in
election,
a warehouse
the
filled with
conservative
banana
Republican
clips.
Party candidate in that
All
country,
loaded,
François Fillon,
ready to go.
didn't make it to the second round. It's a two-round election system.
buy you a
Didn't make it to the
B-52
second round.
Loaded with neutron bombs.
In the second round, the
lots
question
of
is, would he
soldiers
endorse
to do whatever's
Marine Le
necessary.
Pen, the populist demagogue, or would he support
Disneyland
Macron,
can
who had
wait.
been a minister in the former socialist
We have
government?
time.
He,
Someday
although he
there'll
was
be more of us.
ideologically maybe closer to Le Pen, he endorsed Macron.
Maybe then the world can be Disneyland.
In the United States, the Republicans did not
And
do this.
visiting hell will be novel again.
They let our Le Pen in the door. Donald Trump was elected president, and once an authoritarian is in the door, it's a changed game. Steve's going to tell us how this.
So will our Constitution save us? Thank you, by the way, for coming. I have to calm down. I got feedback from my wife after we gave a talk in Brookline last week, and she said, "Stop pounding repeatedly on the lectern." She said, "You're not Nikita Khrushchev." So I'm gonna try to. I get a little worked up. Will our Constitution save us? Our second discovery is not necessarily. Americans have a lot of faith in our constitutional system of checks and balances, and for good reason. We have the oldest, we have the most successful constitution in the history of the world. Our system of checks and balances contained Andrew Jackson, it contained FDR, it contained Nixon. Why shouldn't it contain Trump? But constitutions don't just work automatically. If they did, Argentina, which adopted a constitution which was basically an exact replica of ours in the 19th century, would have been a stable democracy in the 20th century. Instead, it had 6 military coups. Constitutions work best, constitutions work well when they're reinforced by robust democratic norms or unwritten rules. And our book focuses on 2 norms in particular. One is what we call mutual toleration, or accepting the legitimacy of our partisan opponents. That means that no matter how much we disagree with our opponents, no matter how much we may dislike our opponents, we recognize both privately and publicly that they are loyal citizens who love their country, who respect the Constitution, and importantly, who have an equal and legitimate right to compete for power and to govern. In other words, we do not treat our rivals as enemies. The second norm is what we call institutional forbearance. Forbearance means refraining from exercising one's legal right. It is an act of self-restraint. It is the underutilization of power. We don't think about forbearance a lot in politics, but it is absolutely essential. Think about what the president is constitutionally able to do in this country. The president can pardon whoever he or she wants, whenever she wants. Any president with a congressional majority can pack the Supreme Court. You don't like the way the Supreme Court is ruling, you can expand it. If you have a majority in Congress, pass a law, expand it to 11, expand it to 13, and fill the new seats with partisan allies. Perfectly legal. Or if a president's agenda is stalled in Congress, the president can circumvent the legislative process and make policy through executive proclamations or executive orders. The Constitution does not explicitly prohibit such behavior. Or think about what Congress can do. The Senate can use its right of advice and consent to block all the president's cabinet picks, all of his or her court picks, can prevent the president from filling Supreme Court vacancies. Congress can refuse to fund the government and effectively shut down the government. And of course, Congress can impeach the president on virtually whatever grounds it chooses. My point is that the president can exploit the letter of the Constitution, our Constitution, in ways that seriously undermine the spirit of the Constitution, and would therefore can throw our democracy into crisis. Legal scholar Mark Tushnet calls this sort of behavior constitutional hardball, using the letter of the law in a way that eviscerates the spirit of the law. Look at any failing democracy across history and you will find constitutional hardball in abundance. Argentina under Perón, Spain and Germany in the 30s, contemporary Venezuela, Ecuador, Turkey, Hungary, Poland. What historically has prevented our system, checks and balances, from devolving into deadlock, into dysfunction, and maybe even into authoritarianism, are norms of forbearance. It's a shared understanding among politicians that neither side will deploy its institutional prerogatives to the hilt, that the spirit of the law will prevail over the letter of the law. We argue in the book that norms of mutual toleration and forbearance act as the soft guardrails of democracy. They help to prevent healthy political competition from spiraling into the kind of partisan fight to the death that wrecked democracies in Europe in the 1930s and in Latin America in the 1960s and 70s. Now, American democracy hasn't always had soft guardrails. It wasn't born with soft guardrails. It certainly didn't have them in the 1790s when extreme partisan intolerance and pretty heavy-duty constitutional hardball nearly destroyed the new republic. And of course, we lost our norms of mutual toleration and forbearance in the run-up to the Civil War, and we lost them really for about a generation afterwards. But beginning in the late 19th century, Democrats and Republicans largely accepted one another as legitimate and largely avoided destabilizing acts of constitutional hardball. So there were no impeachments, no successful court packings. Senators were judicious in their use of filibusters, were judicious in their use, in their exercise of their right to advice and constraint. They basically, consent, excuse me, basically deferred to the president. And outside of wartime, presidents refrained from acting unilaterally to circumvent Congress. So for more than a century, starting in the late 19th century, our system of checks and balances worked. But again, they worked because they were reinforced by norms of mutual toleration and forbearance. What we argue, and I think we show in the book, is that our country's democratic norms have been unraveling for the last quarter century. We saw early signs of this in the 1990s with the Gingrich-era government shutdowns and the partisan impeachment of Bill Clinton. But the process really took off in the 2000s. When Barack Obama ran for president in 2008, Republicans called him a Marxist, a pro-terrorist, and anti-American. Republican leaders during Obama's presidency, from Giuliani to Huckabee to Gingrich to Palin, said that President Obama did not love America, that Obama and the Democrats were not real Americans. And of course, the birther movement went a step further, questioning Obama's very right to be president. Now, as Daniel pointed out, America has always had an extremist fringe. That is nothing new. What's new is that this was not fringe politics. These were national Republican leaders. This was a vice presidential candidate. Republicans nominated a prominent birther as their presidential candidate in 2016, and they depicted their rival party candidate as a criminal who belonged in jail. So by the 2000s, Republicans had begun to deny the legitimacy of their Democratic rivals. They had begun to cast Democrats as the enemy. The decline of mutual toleration encourages politicians to abandon forbearance. When we view our partisan rivals not as opposition but as enemies, as beyond the pale, when we view them as anti-American, when we view them as a threat to our way of life, we become tempted to use any means necessary to beat them. And that is exactly what's beginning to happen. Politicians are throwing forbearance to the wind. Filibusters are now routine. Politicians shut down the government, refused to raise the debt limit, nearly a few years ago throwing the country into default. We see extraordinary acts of constitutional hardball, like North Carolina's legislative coup of 2016, and perhaps most dramatically of all, the Senate's refusal to allow President Obama to fill a Supreme Court vacancy in 2016. That's an act that was unprecedented since 1866. And all this is before Donald Trump was elected. So the problem is not just that Americans elected a demagogue. It's that we elected a demagogue at a time when the soft guardrails that once protected our system are coming unmoored. So why the hell is this happening? Oh, sorry, I promised that I wouldn't swear and broke it. Won't do it again. We argue that what's primarily driving norm erosion is extreme polarization. Republicans and Democrats have grown so far apart that they now literally fear and loathe one another. In 1960, 5% of Republicans said they would be unhappy if their child married a Democrat. Same thing, basically same number for Democrats. Today that number is 50%. Last year, a Pew survey found that 49% of Republicans and 55% of Democrats said the other party makes them afraid. We've not seen this level of partisan hatred since the end of Reconstruction. And this is not just traditional liberal conservative polarization. People do not fear and loathe one another over taxes and healthcare. They don't. Today's partisan differences run much deeper. They're about race, religion, and way of life. Our parties have changed dramatically during our lifetimes over the last 50 years. If you go back to the 1960s, 1970s, when many of us were growing up, the two parties were demographically and culturally very similar to one another, almost unmistakable from one another. Both parties were overwhelmingly white and Protestant. Parties differed on taxes, on government spending, on foreign policy. But on fundamental issues of God and race, they were very similar. They were overlapping. Three changes that occurred over the last half century. First of all, the civil rights movement led to a massive migration of Southern whites from the Democrats to the Republicans, and of course, with the enfranchisement of African Americans at long last in the South, African Americans became overwhelmingly Democrats. Second, the United States experienced a massive wave of immigration. Most of those immigrants and their kids ended up in the Democratic Party. And third, since Reagan, the early 1980s, evangelical Christians, which were once distributed evenly between the two parties, even a little bit more Democrat than Republican, became overwhelmingly Republican. So by the 2000s, in stark contrast to the 1960s, Democrats and Republicans were demographically and culturally very, very different. The Democrats, of course, are a rainbow coalition of urban secular whites and a diversity of ethnic minorities. The Republicans, by contrast, remain overwhelmingly white and Christian. That's important because white Christians are not just any group. They were once the majority, good-sized majority in this country, and even more importantly, they used to sit unchallenged atop this country's social, economic, cultural, and political hierarchy. They filled the presidency, Congress, Supreme Court, governor's mansions. They were pillars of local communities. They were the CEOs. They were the newscasters. They were the movie stars. They were the college professors. And crucially, they were the face of both the Democratic and Republican parties. Those days, of course, are long gone. But losing one's majority and losing one's dominant social status can be deeply, deeply threatening. Many Republican voters, not all, many Republican voters feel like the country that they grew up in is being taken away from them. And that, we think, is what ultimately drives polarization in this country. The problem is that extreme polarization can kill democracies. This is a major lesson from the failure of democracy in Europe in the 1930s, in South America in the 1970s. When politics is so deeply polarized that each side views a victory by the other side as intolerable, as beyond the pale, democracies are ruined. When an opposition victory is viewed as intolerable, you start to justify using extraordinary means to prevent it. Violence, repression, election fraud, coup.
Hello, you're in tune with me, Lee
have
Gamble,
not
for the
reached
next
that
2
point,
hours.
obviously. But we have reached a point where, according to exit polls in 2016, 1 out of 4 Trump voters believed that he was unfit for the presidency of the United States. He was unfit for office, and yet he was still preferable to a Democrat. We've reached a point where, according to Gallup, Republicans have a much more favorable view of Vladimir Putin than they do Hillary Clinton. Those are dangerous levels of polarization. So Donald Trump is a challenge, but the most fundamental challenge we face today is extreme polarization, driven by a radicalized Republican Party that represents a declining white Christian majority, many of whose members perceive themselves to face an existential threat. Trump is a symptom of that polarization, not a cause of it, and his departure from the presidency is very unlikely to end it.
Shout to Gash, shout to Malika.
So what can we do in 2 minutes or less? For one, it's absolutely clear that the Republican Party has to change, that it has to become a more diverse party. As long as the GOP represents a white Christian party in a society as diverse as ours, it will always be prone to white nationalist appeals. Always be prone to white nationalist extremism. What can Democrats do? There's been a lot of talk, increasing amounts of talk in recent weeks and months in progressive circles about learning how to fight like Republicans. Seriously, if Republicans are going to play constitutional hardball, then Democrats have to play tit for tat. If they don't, they will be victims of an endless series of sucker punches, stolen Supreme Court seats, and the like.
Coming on a Trezor, I think.
And Democrats, in fact, are learning how to fight like Republicans. They just used the filibuster last week to trigger their first major government shutdown. That is, they moved straight out of the New Gingrich playbook. Many Democrats will run this year on a platform of impeachment. That will be the central thing they campaign on. And if Democrats win control of the Senate, there's talk of denying President Trump the ability to fill any Supreme Court vacancy, just like the Republicans did to Obama. We worry a lot about this response. Fighting like Republicans, as legitimate as that is and seems, will inevitably reinforce and even accelerate the process of norm erosion. It will further weaken our country's democratic guardrails. And in our experience studying democracies in crisis in Europe and Latin America and elsewhere, that sort of escalation never ends well. Never ends well. So in our view, opposition to Trump should be loud, it should be vigorous, it should be muscular, but it should be norm defending rather than norm breaking. These days, forbearance is often seen, particularly among Democrats, as a sign of weakness, as a sign of sort of backing down or giving in to the other side's bullying. But I want to suggest that in reality, it takes great political courage and strength. Sometimes it means standing up to an angry base and saying you're not going to do what they want. You're going to do what's best for the country and for our country's institutions. Republicans have utterly failed to show that leadership over the last decade or so. Democrats should not follow in their footsteps. Now, I was told I should close with a note of hope. But I'm out of time.
What happens now?
Okay.
Hi.
Reaction to points. In terms of the election, 2016, the reason why Trump was nominated is because none of the other candidates were good enough to oppose him. The thing that bothers me the most, that gets very little press as far as the election goes, and you know this statistic, 43% of the electorate stayed home. And this is the most scary thing for me to realize, because this is not democracy if people are going to stay home. Bernie Sanders should have been the candidate, Hillary Clinton, the queen of, the Democratic Party, sort of boxed him out, and the Bernie people stayed home. So this is that point. I just have one comment as far as packing the courts. My hero and many of my parents, friends and family's hero, FDR, tried to pack the courts too, as you probably know. And for some reason it didn't work, but maybe you could comment on why. But he tried. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good question. So, I sort of take the first point to be about voter turnout at some level. Why is voter turnout low, and what can be done about this? And, it's a very complicated question. There's lots of things that work. And it's in some ways easy to blame citizens for not turning out. But one way I think about this that maybe is a little different is that in many ways, the parties mobilize voters to turn out. And parties mobilize voters to turn out, not individually. No, individual voters aren't contacted. Usually, the way historically this has happened is voters are members of groups, organizations, civil society institutions, labor unions for the left, for instance. And as civil society institutions have transformed and as labor unions have weakened, it's harder for parties to reach and to mobilize voters. And so one kind of transformation and actually there's recent political science, I just read a recent paper which research that shows in states that have laws that restrict the ability of unions to organize, there's lower voter turnout, and this has negative consequences. So I think in a way the kind of transformation of our economy, so it's getting into the complex part of the answer, transformation of the economy, the weakening of labor unions, means that parties need to find new parties to mobilize. And parties need to come up with new techniques of organization, as well as dealing with the rise of new types of media. So in some ways, I think the problem of turnout is in part an organization and a technological challenge. And so parties need to develop new ways of reaching voters. On the second point about court packing, so that's a story we tell in the book. It's a fascinating and revealing story of Roosevelt, after winning re-election in 1936, decided his New Deal agenda was stalling out, and all the members of the Supreme Court had received their legal educations in the 19th century. These were these old-fashioned guys, and he wanted to get and they were blocking his agenda, so he wanted to expand the size of the court, and he pushed for this. And it was interesting doing research on this because as we did it, I really had the feeling, had I been alive at that time, I may have been cheering him on. But the other part of me realized also that this is dangerous. This is exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about, where institutions are politicized. And had he been successful, who knows what, the Supreme Court would be constantly changing its number. And so he was defeated. How was he defeated, though? This is the interesting thing. He was defeated not only by Republicans, but by members of the Democratic Party. There were conservative Democrats as well as New Deal allies who thought this was too far. And there was one incredible story of one senator from Wyoming who was such a close partner and friend of the Roosevelts. At the inauguration dinner, he sat next to Eleanor Roosevelt, and 4 weeks later came out publicly against this and viewed this as an attack on democratic institutions and came out against this. So this was a case of party allies saying the institutions are more important than our agenda.
And so another case of that is Nixon. Nixon took a while, but Nixon ultimately is defeated by defection of key members of his own party, not just Democrats. At the end of the day, he stopped considering Democrats and Republicans. The question is, today, if there's a similar abuse, an abuse comparable to FDR's court packing, to Nixon's many criminal acts, would Republicans cross the aisle and stand up to Trump? And I think so far the evidence is probably not. Sir.
In your, I was impressed by your analysis, all of it, and yet it focused on polarization and forbearance, it seemed to me. I was really surprised that you didn't mention what I see as sort of the 800-pound gorilla, which is Roger Ailes, Fox News, and disinformation on the internet. In a time when with polarization is so much what is going to kill us, we can't get people to agree that water is wet. They live in alternate universes, and I don't see. Again, I'm out of time, but lack of hope. I don't see what's going to change that dynamic.
Yeah, so there is clear evidence that that the rise of social media and also of hyper-partisan media is pushing public opinion to the extreme. So there is evidence that is at work. Our view is that that's a secondary cause, that the underlying cause of our polarization, underlying source of our polarization is the partisan, racial and cultural sorting that I described. This is that Fox News is exacerbating the problem, but take it away and we would still have a deeply polarized society.
I also was very impressed with all the analyses, and especially the parties as gatekeepers. And having this kind of for the country exchange is getting harder and harder to the polarization. I was also, my ears perked up when, Dan, you talked about we need a reorganization internally to both parties, but especially, I think, to the Democratic Party because of Hillary Clinton locked in, the Democrats locked her in right away. And there was some sort of what you call invisible primary there that dominated throughout that go for the presidency. And when I was so shocked at 2 a.m. when, Wisconsin was won, I was shocked like everybody else. But then I said, did Hillary Clinton give us Trump? And that, I'd like some comments on that. That's too much of a reduction. But it keys in, I think, to what you're talking about regarding a real need for a deep reorganization, both Stephen and Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I understand the point. And there's, some people maybe didn't like Hillary, and there's, maybe reasons to think she wasn't the best candidate. But there's a difference between having a mediocre candidate and a candidate who's a threat to democracy. And so I think the most we can hope for from parties is that they deliver, at the very least, mediocre candidates. Okay? And, so at some level, I think maybe there was the process of selecting Hillary, was not the process that's not the outcome that people wanted. But had she become president, we would be in a different situation than we are now. So I think, from my view, the real core of the problem is to think about how did a demagogue figure get through this obstacle course. And that's at the end of the day is the biggest threat to our democracy. We can debate about policy differences between the left side of the Democratic Party, the right side of the Democratic Party, or even between somebody like Mitt Romney and the Democratic Party. But these are policy debates. These are the kinds of debates we should be having. We shouldn't be having debates about, is this person a threat to democracy? So that's why at the end of the day, if I have to choose, it's a balancing act. If you want gatekeeping, but this may also, generate candidates that people don't like. In some ways, that's part of the democratic thing.
Hi, thanks. That was great. It sounds like we've got lots of good examples of democracies that died that map pretty well onto what we're experiencing. In your research, have you also found examples of democracies that were terminally ill but turned it around, that can sort of serve as a playbook for us from here on out?
Yeah, that is a great question. I would not call U.S. democracy terminally ill. We look, again, getting back to the last question about gatekeeping. There have been, it's been a long time, and most of us have seen very little of this in our lifetime, but it's been a long time since there were numerous extremist, anti-democratic candidates and parties floating around. But go back to the 1920s and 30s. Maybe Daniel should be answering this question because this is what he works on. And there were a lot of them. Several important European democracies were destroyed by, as Daniel described in his talk, by the rise of extremist candidates and parties, almost invariably in alliance with mainstream politicians. But there were democracies that avoided that fate. There were democracies where conservative parties said no and refused to strike up a line, even if it was electorally beneficial.
Coming on different circles.
Or they calculated that it might be electorally beneficial. Conservative parties kept extremists at a distance. One of them is Belgium. Another one is Finland. Those are two cases in which that extremists were kept at bay. It was an extremely polarizing period in the late 20s and 1930s, but democracy survived, at least until the Nazis survived in Belgium.
Yeah, so if you want to hear more about the stories by the book, we tell great stories about Belgium and Finland. But there's also cases, and this is maybe less hopeful, cases of democracy being rebuilt after trauma. And so we also tells stories about the rebuilding of Chilean democracy after Pinochet, as well as the rebuilding of German democracy, Western democracy after 1945. And, you know, it's not automatic that these processes of redemocratization would take place. Certainly these are cases and experiences where people only overcame their differences in the face of trauma, major trauma. And so the question is, you know, can we learn from those cases? I think we can. But can we learn from those cases without having to undergo that trauma ourselves?
I'm going to make one more comment about the terminally ill thing. I mean, that was a good question, and I didn't mean to make light of the issue. We again, I don't think that American democracy is terminally ill, but we, all of us, including me, have throughout our lives made the mistake, I think, of taking the stability of American democracy for granted. We're an old democracy, we're a successful democracy, we're a stable democracy, so most of us haven't worried about it. And our politicians, our pundits, our media don't think much about the consequences of really reckless, irresponsible behavior. And that's a mistake. Because democracy can die. But even if we're not terminal right now, it's clear that there are warning signs. It's clear that our democracy is not functioning the way it should. It's clear that there are threats on the horizon. And so that's why it's really important that we take lessons, one, from democratic failures, but also, as the question implied, from cases that manage to turn things around.
I always think that there's like two forms of capitalism here. We have capitalism in Cambridge and New York City and LA, but there's a whole different form of capitalism in the Rust Belt. And as somebody who's had to drive around the country a lot, and I've driven to Ohio back and forth, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 times in the last 10 years. And I would go to these country areas and the back roads and I would see all this poverty and this disconnected poverty. And I would see all the, problems with addiction and, opioid. And I'd say, wow. And I'd come back to Cambridge and I'd say, do you know what's going on in New York State? Do you know what's going on in rural Ohio? And they would say, no, we have no idea. And I'd say, you will, at some point. So I wasn't surprised at all by Donald Trump's election because of the anger that I saw in the Rust Belt. And it's something you're not even mentioning, the money. And, I always think it's the money, stupid, they're not making as much money. The economy isn't doing well. And they're completely ignored by the powers that be. So that's
shout to KGL
why aren't you bringing up the money?
Yeah, no, that you're right. We didn't mention this. In the book, we do have a description. I think you're absolutely right that one of the another way to put the point that you've made is that a driving force of this is rising levels of inequality, economic inequality. We're currently living, as you all know, in a period of inequality that's unmatched since any time since the late 19th century, early 20th century. And so this is something that has certainly made our politics much more vulnerable to these kinds of upsurges. And this is a global phenomenon. It's happening everywhere in advanced democracies. And so one extra point, though, that I would add to this and how this ties into the argument we've been making so far is that it's the combination in many ways of this rising economic inequality an increasingly diverse society that makes the politics of backlash so dangerous and so tempting for politicians to take advantage of. And so when particular groups are targeted because of this rising disaffection with the good reasons to be disaffected from the economy, but it takes the form of anti-immigrant sentiment. So, and one of the kind of experiments, mental experiments I sometimes imagine is, had the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, which passed in the 1960s, as well as immigration reform, which passed in the 1960s, had this all happened in the late 40s, and 50 years of robust economic growth followed, we might not have we wouldn't have experienced the same kind of antagonisms that we're experiencing today. So what would in fact happen, our real history, is these reforms passed, helped democratize America, and within several years the global economy shifted. And so it's the slowdown in the global economy. So it's the combination of these dynamics that I think have left us in a very vulnerable position.
And this is something the Democrats can do, right? The Democrats have really dropped the ball over the last quarter century on inequality. Democrats, like center-left parties elsewhere, are supposed to be the party of the little guy. They're supposed to be the party of redistribution. And since the early 1990s, this has been basically off the agenda of the Democratic Party. And so one thing that the Democrats can do is actually push seriously for policies to redistribute wealth. Which really, we've had 16 years of Democratic administrations in the last quarter century that have done almost nothing to combat a steady rise in income inequality.
Well, I think you may have just answered my question, but you described what we're undergoing now as polarization, which kind of implies, in the logic of it, that both poles are equally at fault, equally extreme. And yet, as you just mentioned, we have one of the poles which, whose leadership is now describing as too extreme for them. Policies that are very popular with their base and which were mainstream Democratic politics in the 70s, like just a living wage a minimum wage that's a living wage, or expanding access to Medicare. So I was going to ask you to comment on that, but maybe you just did.
We argue very clearly in the book that this is an asymmetric polarization. This is a polarization that's being driven by an extremist Republican Party. I think the evidence behind that is pretty clear.
Yeah, and something that some people have asked us about this on the Republican side and said, well, the Democrats, have some blame to share, and we emphasize in the book that we think the historical record suggests that it began with the Republicans, but at some level, it's important to debate the history to understand what's going on, but we're now in a situation where there's the threat that both sides, there's a kind of threat of a spiral. So in terms of abiding by the procedures of democracy, the norms of democracy, and that's what we worry about.
One of the things that you guys mentioned towards the end of the book is how, if you look around the world throughout history, there really haven't been too many cases of a democracy with a non-homogeneous population being successful with moral and racial equality. And, that kind of shocked me, at first, and then I started thinking about it. And do you think maybe just with the U.S., is the U.S. too big? Is it too diverse? Is there too much going on to really tap into that, have a functioning democracy in that way?
So here's my ray of hope. One of the reasons why we actually think that the democracy that we built in this country really beginning in 1965 is pretty unique and pretty special. It combines a bold and effective constitution with an experiment, at least important steps towards racial equality in a diverse society, which is almost unique in the world. And I actually think that, I personally think that the combination of still very strong democratic institutions with a history of at least some success in ethnic assimilation and integration, for all of the horrible performance of this country and this society on issues of race and at times treatment of immigrants, I think a pretty good case can be made that everybody else has done worse. I think if there's a country that has a shot in the decades to come at establishing itself as a truly multi-ethnic democracy, it's ours.
In the last election cycle, it was clear that people on both sides of the aisle felt very disenfranchised, that their preferences were not being taken into account and were not making a difference at the end of the day. I was curious if you could comment on this, and something that maybe you didn't comment on was the amount of money in politics and corporate interests and the way that those potentially have led to some of that disenfranchisement. Maybe in your research you looked at some countries that have more than two parties that rely on referendums or other kind of democratic institutions for people to be able to have an impact at the national level.
Very good question. I think you're right that there's evidence across. It's not just the United States; it's across again advanced democracies. There's growing disaffection with mainstream political parties, and parties are transforming all around the world. There's new parties springing up in Spain. The current governing party in Spain is about to collapse, and there's new parties, and this all and it's in Italy as well, so all around the world. And this comes from some deep sense that democracies aren't delivering. So, what is this driven by? There's lots of factors at work. Economic inequality is certainly one part of this. But I think also in the United States in particular, political parties are supposed to express people's interests and preferences about politics, and there's a disconnect. And I think part of the problem is that parties have been hollowed out to a large degree. We think of parties as being very strong, but American political parties are quite weak. And in particular, they've lost control of money, and they've lost control of the message. So with the opening up of campaign finance, this means that outside groups are able to shape the political agenda in ways that normal citizens can't, number one. And number two, with the transformation of media, there's a way in which parties, newspapers used to be named after parties, the Press Democrat. And so there was a kind of way in which parties and media were closely connected, and so voters identified with newspapers, identified with parties. So there's a way in which parties have lost control over debate, and so there's a disconnect as a result of it. So I think again, I mean, this comes back to a theme I've mentioned before, that I think political parties are an invention of the late 19th century. They need to be reinvented for our current age.
Dr. Ziblatt, I'm in your current Politics of Europe class, and yesterday in lecture you mentioned that history can be described as periods of punctuated equilibrium, and where we have moments where there are critical opportunities to make choices, and then our choices become sticky, and we end up on a specific path. Do you believe we're still in that critical period, or are we already on a set path?
Good question. Good. Dang, Harvard.
Yes, right. Yeah, well, one of the things about this is that often it's hard to know if one's in one of these moments, and it's easier for historians to identify you're in a period of opening. I think our political system runs on multiple streams. So there's certain things that are open, there's other things that are not. One thing that is very sticky is our Constitution. It's very hard to change our Constitution. So, there's people ask about the Electoral College and changing the Senate, and there's all sorts of kind of proposals that people can dream up of why our 18th century antiquated Constitution is something we should just junk. But it turns out it's very hard to change American political institutions in particular. So I think that's very sticky. I think something that's not sticky, it's something where there is a potential for opening now. I don't know, Steve may disagree on this, but that a kind of realignment of the political parties. We have these two parties, we kind of know what they stand for, but there's a sense in which increasingly I attend events with moderate Republicans where they are talking to Democrats, and things are in flux when it comes to party realignment. And this has happened in American history, where you have parties shifting in the 1960s. There was a kind of big shift in parties in the 1850s. Lincoln was, began the Republican Party, the modern Republican Party. So there's a way in which, because of all this flux in the party landscape, the idea of a third party coming along and challenging the two main parties, there's maybe more opportunity and there's a bigger opening.
So I don't agree with that. But I can point to what, instead of play an imaginary game, point to what might have been a political country. And I'm very worried about the way that our party system, the dynamic of our party system today, in which the Republicans represent a declining white Christian, very homogeneous white Christian, what used to be a majority, now minority. I think as long as that dynamic holds, eventually this will get them into electoral trouble. Nobody knows exactly when they'll become the Californian Republican Party. If they continue, it will happen, but they can do a lot of damage between now and then. So it's really problematic that they got on this path. After losing the 2012 election, the Republican Party leadership thought very seriously about what it could do to become a more diverse party. They did this autopsy, and they thought seriously about making the changes that we argue critical to reduce the polarization in this country. They're also becoming a country that deals with a 21st century diverse society that can live in such a society. Because, as Daniel correctly pointed out, there is no Republican Party leadership. It's completely hollowed out. There's no establishment that can impose that vision, impose that lesson, impose that line It was just a hollowed out party that Donald Trump was able to grab and pull in another direction. Had they actually had a real party leadership that could impose that vision of a more diverse party, we would not be hurling in the direction we're hurling today.
You've addressed this somewhat, but when the framers were putting this government together, they looked at this issue of democracies going all the way back to the beginning of time, and it's the Greeks or whatever, and they determined that the biggest threat to this particular democracy would be the growing inequality between the haves and the have-nots. So as I said, you seem to have addressed that, but you didn't mention the election, so that's why I got to ask the question. But you're saying that this government is not, this democracy is not terminally ill, but at the same time you suggest that the system of checks and balances is possibly not equal to the challenges and threats to the system. So I'm just wondering if you feel as though maybe the time has come for a new constitutional convention, or do you think that's going a little bit too far?
Yeah, so I think good question. Thank you. I think our checks and balances, some of our checks and balances are working better than others. So I think our legal system is working quite well. Our judiciary is working quite well. Social institutions, media is working as robustly. New York Times subscriptions are up and so on. Our Congress is not working. Congress is supposed to be a guard dog of our democracy and constrain the power of the president. And the guard dog has turned into a lapdog. And so it's not serving its constitutional role. And I think part of this is driven by polarization and the radicalization of the Republican Party, in which the Congress sort of turns into a shield when it's the same party, and a weapon when it's the other. I don't think that we should have, I'm nervous about, and there's movement for constitutional conventions, but I sort of would want to issue a warning. There's lots of discussion, it turns out, for proposals for constitutional convention where states can propose call for a constitutional convention, and there's a kind of different route through which a constitutional convention could be called. What makes me nervous about this is you have to imagine at that constitutional convention who's going to be at the table and what kind of agenda is going to be pushed. And I think it's possible that the things we can imagine ought to be changed in our national government, but if you kind of open the door, who knows what will come out of this. So I think it's a very dangerous kind of
most widely used and respected institution based in Great Britain that studies global inequality has been doing it for years. In January of 2018, they issued a document entitled Reward Work, Not Wealth. Basically, it makes the case for exactly what its title says. But in so doing, it talks about the latest research it has either done or commissioned on global inequality, including the attitudes of people toward global inequality. So I want to bring you some of what they found, because it is crucial to understanding how the capitalist system that governs the world today, both in the so-called advanced part of the world and in the so-called less developed part. If you want to make an assessment of the capitalist system, take a look at its results. It's a logical way to proceed. So here are some of them. Last year, that's 2017, saw the biggest increase in the number of billionaires in history. One more billionaire was added to the list every 2 days. There are now, and this may come as a surprise to you, 2,043 billionaires in the world. 9 out of 10 of them are men. These billionaires, these 2,043 individuals, in a population on this planet of 7 billion individuals, 2,000, that's 0.0000001% of the population. Their wealth last year increased by a total of $762 billion. That is, the value of their stocks and bonds and land holdings went up by $762 billion. By every known calculation of the number of people around the world living in extreme poverty, that amount of money is more than you need to eradicate extreme poverty on this planet. Let me drive this point home to you. The richest 2,043 people on the earth became richer over the last year by an amount of money larger than what would have been necessary to bring hundreds of millions of people out of extreme poverty, usually calculated as people living on less than $1.90 per day for food, clothing, shelter, and everything else. What kind of a society would be organized in such a way as to make the 2,043 richest people on the planet $762 billion richer, when that's more than the money needed to eradicate extreme poverty for their fellow citizens, for their fellow human beings? This is a system that can't solve that problem, that makes the problem worse year after year. Meanwhile, some statistics I've given you in the past continue to be true and reaffirmed by Oxfam's research. The richest 1% on this planet own more wealth than the other 99% combined. The richest 1%, this happened in 2016, when over half, that is, the richest 1% own more than half. The other 99% fight over the remaining half. What Oxfam also did last year, and what I also want to report to you is, they surveyed 70,000 people in 10 countries. Population of those countries represent 1/4 of the world's population. So they did this survey in countries that together account for 1/4 of the people on this planet. Over 3/4 of the people they surveyed either agree or strongly agree that the gap between rich and poor in their country is too large. The numbers range from 58% in the Netherlands, believe that, to 92% in Nigeria. Believe that. 2/3 of the respondents in the 10 countries think that the gap between rich and poor needs to be addressed urgently or very urgently. So what have we got? A wildly unequal distribution of wealth and income in the world, and a vast majority of the people who are against it. And nonetheless, it gets worse, not better, with each passing year. What the majority thinks is unable in this culture and in this economy to be translated into corrective action. Overwhelming majorities want something which doesn't happen. The opposite happens, which means that those at the top not only have the wealth in their hands, but have bought the political system to make sure it isn't responsive to what the majority of people would want. This means that the consequences of capitalism are not only gross inequality, but also the political corruption that prevents that problem from being addressed, even though the majority of people want it to be. In a peculiar way, much of the rest of today's economic updates will operate a little bit to illustrate what the summary that Oxfam has produced allowed me to just tell you about. So let's begin. Let me introduce to you the owner of a store you may have encountered, if not personally, well, through the internet. The store in question is called Victoria's Secret. It is a famous store that sells lingerie and all kinds of underwear and so forth. The owner is a billionaire, one of the 2043 I just told you about. His name is Leslie Wexner, W-E-X-N-E-R. He is 78 years of age, and he is worth, apparently, $7 billion. That is, he owns $7 billion worth of, well, I'm going to tell you about some of the things he owns, but I presume most of it is stocks and bonds, because that's what most of the wealthy hold most of their wealth in, those forms. But Mr. Wexner lives well. Perhaps most famous is a huge mansion in Britain. Mansions in Britain have their own name. This one is called Foxcote.
Yeah, this one,
F-O-X-C-O-T-E.
lies number 26.
Cost him apparently $30 million. It is referred to in the press as a gentleman's shooting estate. In October, helicopters came in, and apparently the shooting was done from the helicopter. What kind of sport you might want to call this, I leave to your judgment and your imagination. Mr. Wexner also owns a $47 million mansion outside of Columbus, Ohio. Likewise, one of the largest yachts ever built in the world. He owns it. In 1997, he got some more publicity when he paid $16.5 million for a 1954 Ferrari automobile, but he's in litigation fighting with the former owner or the auction house that sold it to him, and so forth. Why am I telling you this? Because I want you to understand that the people who are billionaires are only billionaires because the rest of us enable them to be billionaires. The people who go in and spend large amounts of money on the products of Victoria's Secret. When you buy that highly priced piece of clothing, you're feeding the billionaire Mr. Wexner. You're paying for that yacht and that mansion. Every time you shop there, and I don't mean to pick on Victoria's Secret, although I do get a bit of a kick out of it, because I could do the same thing with all the other billionaires, all of whom are in that position because you and I pay the money that flows into their pockets. You might think that if we pay the money, we would have some say about how that money is used, but not in a capitalist system. They can use it, and Mr. Wexner has done it in the way I've just summarized. My next economic update takes me once again to the issue of immigration. I don't mean to harp on it, but it is something that keeps being in the news. Why? Because Mr. Trump and the Republicans think they have a politically viable way to impress people. So now, let's do the numbers to see whether there's any truth in it. The population of the United States is 325 million people, roughly. So if we want to talk about the economic well-being of the American people, we're talking about the economic well-being, the job holders, who are roughly half of that population. How many undocumented immigrants are there, and those are the only ones that are being talked about when there's all this talk about stopping immigration or reversing immigration or expelling undocumented immigrants. Best guess of the United States government, 11.8 million. Let's be clear, right? We're talking, when we talk about immigration, undocumented immigration, about 11, let's round it off, 12 million people. In a population of 325 million people. Here's a hot flash for all of you. Nothing about that 11.8 million, no matter what happens to them or what is done to them, is going to fundamentally alter the economic situation of the American people. Lots of attention to expelling these 700,000 or closing off the border to these million. You're not talking about things that are going to change the problems of the American people, the economic problems. The whole focus on immigration is fake, is phony. It's a way to distract Americans from the economic problems they do have, serious ones, that affect tens of millions of families in this country, that are not going to be affected one way or the other in any significant degree by anything that is done to the immigrants. So even if you are the kind of American who conveniently forgets that the whole country is a country of immigrants, precisely because you wiped out the people who were here when the immigrants first came. And even if you're the kind of American who doesn't care about what it means to expel people at the bottom of the economic ladder who have already suffered from poverty and lack of education and poor housing and all the rest, and you want them to be the butt of your action to fix an economy, fixing it on the backs of those most already impoverished by it? If you don't have any moral problems with that, no ethical problems with that, here's the argument, the reasoning an economist would give you. It's not the issue, friends. Jobs are the issue. Automation is the issue. Unequal distribution of wages and profits is the issue. Our whole capitalist system is the issue. Immigrants aren't the issue. It's as if you told me that the house was on fire, and I told you, take a little nail file and try to work on a corner of the wood at the base of the house. You'd scream at me and say, that's not going to solve the problem of a house on fire. We need a lot of water, we need other things, but filing the corner of a piece of wood, you're crazy. My response as an economist to the discussion of immigration, to seeing Mr. Trump and the Republican leaders, the Democratic leaders arguing and fighting over this, is to see a system whose job it is to distract the mass of people suffering from it from the system itself. Nobody's questioning the system. We're fighting over immigrants. It is a terrible misunderstanding of what's going on that makes all of that possible. Before I go on to other updates, let me remind you, as we always do, to make use of our websites, rdwolf.com and Democracy at Work, that's all one word, democracyatwork.info.
What's happening, mate?
Through those websites, you can communicate to us what you like and don't like about the program, what you would like us to cover. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can show us ways we can be more useful to you. For those of you that listen to this program as a radio program or as a podcast, let me remind you that you can also see it as a television program. The easiest way to do that, go to patreon.com, Patreon, patreon.com/economic update, and you can watch this program as a television program. These are all ways of partnering with us. Making us reach more people is something you can help us do, and something we ask you to do as well as invite you to do. The websites are the key way to do that. They're available to you at no charge ever, 24/7. Continuing on our story. After the tax cut bill was passed in December, of last year, a great deal of noise was spent saying how this was, in the words of our president, a middle-class tax cut and so forth. I wanted to do some research to basically answer the question, is the tax cut that was passed by Mr. Trump and the Republicans something that will really transform America's people, fix the middle class, rebuild the middle class, save the middle class, transform its economic situation? So let me tell you the research I did and the results I found. First, I made use of research done by the Tax Policy Center, a nonpartisan, very good, very well qualified research outfit. And they sat down and did a study of how each level of household in America would be affected by the tax cut. Let me give you just a small flavor of what they said. If you earn less than $25,000 a year, so you are among the poorer folks in America, the tax cut will save you, get ready, because it's really going to change your life. If you earn less than $25,000, the tax cut will save you $60. That's right. You heard me. $60. If you earn between $25,000 and $49,000 a year, it will save you $360. If you earn between $49,000 and $86,000 a year, it will save you $930. That's most Americans right there. So most Americans are going to save between $60 and $900. I understand $900 is a significant amount of money for a lot of people. It's not going to transform your life. It's what you save in the entire year, not per week, not per month. That's what you save across 2018 by virtue of that fact. Now, if you are a millionaire, if you earn I'll use this number because you might find it interesting. If you earn over $3.4 million a year, here's how much you will save by the tax cut in 2018. Ready? Here we go. $193,380. Let me do that again. If you earn over $3.4 million, you will save nearly $200,000 on your tax. That's a lot of money. In order to save a lot of money, you already have to have a lot of money. That's how this system always works. Nothing new has happened in this tax cut. For the vast majority of Americans, what you save in taxes will not fundamentally change your situation at all. This wasn't a tax cut for you, but it was a tax cut for the really rich. They will now have an extra $200,000. Not you. It was not a tax cut for you. It was a tax cut at your expense, because you have to remember that when they cut all those taxes that don't have to be paid, particularly not by rich people, the next step is to say the government, not getting all that money from people, will not be able to fund a whole lot of programs for school kids, for road maintenance, for college education. We're going to have a season of cutting because there isn't enough money, because they cut taxes, above all on the rich. So you're going to not get benefit of the tax cut, but you are likely going to pay the cost of the tax cut, which is in a reduction in the quality and the quantity of public services in the United States, which middle and lower income people rely on more than the folks at the top. You want a tax cut for the middle class? Then give it to the middle class. We don't do that in America. We say we do it, but we don't do it. In case you're wondering, we have actually a case study that proves all this. Back in 2012, a person like Trump, a man named Sam Brownback, became the governor of Kansas. And he did in Kansas what Mr. Trump has now done. He cut taxes on the rich, and he cut taxes on corporations, promising it would really explode the economy of Kansas. It didn't do anything of the sort. Kansas went downward. Its unemployment got worse than the rest of America in a way it hadn't before. There was no explosion of jobs, none of it. So bad is it that in the last session of the Kansas legislature, they put back in the very taxes that they had cut out under Mr. Brownback, and he was dispatched off as an ambassador to someplace abroad. I can't remember the name of the country. He's gone from Kansas, gone from the United States. A disaster. Because it didn't work in Kansas, it's of course logical that the same kind of politicians will now do it in the country as a whole. Next update. Many of you have no doubt watched with horror the public trial of a doctor who worked on Olympic athletes in the United States, particularly young women, who was also for a long time a professor of medical sciences at Michigan State University. He has been sentenced to spend the rest of his life in jail. He has had to listen to 150 or maybe more young women testify as to what he did to them over 20 or 30 years of being the official doctor for the USA Gymnastics that organizes our Olympic competitors, and likewise his activities at Michigan State. In recent weeks, the president of Michigan State University, other officials there, and likewise the entire board of USA Gymnastics quit. And they quit because of a rising chorus of anger and bitterness, not just from the women who suffered the sexual abuse, the sexual assaults over all those years, not even just from their families, their friends, their communities, but from the general public. And I want to say to you a word about that because there's an economic lesson in all of this. Here's the lesson. If you organize a teaching institution, a university, such as Michigan State, a good, big state university, if you organize it as a school, it behaves in one way. If you organize it as a business, it behaves in a different way. A business depends on customers. It is afraid to reveal any of its shortcomings to its customers lest they go someplace else. It's afraid to admit to its shareholders or those who control it that it did bad things for fear they will invest somewhere else. Businesses tend to hide the illegal, the immoral that they do because it's in their interest to do that. The behavior of the people who run Michigan State University is the behavior of people in a business. It turns out that the police department of Michigan State University received something on the order of 100 complaints from young athletes at the university about this same Dr. Nassar. Some of them were pursued, some of them weren't. Nothing ever happened. The administration failed to take the most minimal protections. How in the world did you not have a major investigation after 100 complaints? What is the possibility that you didn't know? That's not serious. That you didn't care? I'm not willing to assume that about these people. I don't think they're monsters. But they are caught up in a system that rewards them for keeping it quiet, for hushing it up, for not letting anyone know. And when you do that, you don't expose the problem and you don't solve the problem. You subordinate the solving of the problem to the keeping up of your income, your money, your profits. Long ago, we made major universities into businesses that sell sports, that sell events, that sell all kinds of things. They even sell positions in their schools. That's not healthy. And one of the prices you pay when you mix business with education is you get business-type results. Hiding, dissimulating, making money even at the expense of the most basic kinds of human care for one another. Michigan State stands exposed, but these problems are not unique to Michigan State. They affect the entire universe of higher education and other institutions. Being businesslike has always been a very mixed bag. We've come to the end of Economic Update's first half hour. Please stay with us. I think you'll find the second half.
And so, with the first floor basement now completed, I figured it was worth taking a little bit of a side trip to visit that android and seeing what he's been up to while we were gone. Seems he's been quite busy making very nice artistic representations of each one of the spirits we've released. And I will say that he does a pretty good job of representing each one of them, even though I get the feeling he never actually met them. Now, while some of them are a bit unflattering, I still think he really captures the essence of each person. Especially old Oliver here and his pretty large appetite. But outside of soaking in all the art, another good reason to head back to this room occasionally is that you can find an additional syringe.
You see that thing on the desk? You can take it with you. Hope you'll find it useful.
Now, while we haven't really had much uses for syringes just yet, I think they will be pretty useful in the forthcoming areas.
Why did you come back here? When you disappeared, I thought you went back to Earth. I knew you'd find what you wished for on Earth. That's why I thought you returned. By the power of that red stone.
This still leads me to believe that maybe there's some malfunction going on with this android, that maybe he's mistaking us for somebody else. I mean, especially considering that he thinks we might have gone to Earth while we just left this room. But it also does leave him question just who he thinks we are and what wish from the Red Stone might have led us back to the moon here. Either way, he seems to be a kind of unreliable source of information, so I guess we should just take what he says with a grain of salt. Instead, we should follow up with Oliver's info and see if we can't catch up with our fiancé in the work area.
Fear leads, and you can deal with what you are doing in a loving way. I'd like to start the work today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow with a meditation, with the quieting of our mind and the playing of music, so that we can fill our body with sound. We can release what we have experienced coming here and setting ourselves in place and opening our mind to preparing to understand what I am sharing with you. As a theme for meditation, I'd like to give you the words of Wilhelm Oswald, a great German scientist who is the father of the theories of color. He was a chemist, a brilliant philosopher. He learned how to live life fully. His equation is the following. What?
Leaning. I'm just translating.
G equals A joining that being minus W. And what that says is Glück, gleich Arbeit, weniger Widerstand. Glück is happiness. Is equal to work, Arbeit, minus resistance. This is what I'm going to try to share with you these days, is to give you the information with minimum resistance. And in accordance with that, we can deal with this knowledge in a joyful, happy, cheerful way. I'm not trying to drive home or sell you an argument that we fool on. Take it in for yourself, what I'm saying, test it, evaluate it. Come back and critique with me. You've got me here for 3 days, and the more you hit me, the more I will enjoy it. I'll come back twice as hard. This type of dialogue, the testing by fire, is the way real knowledge takes place. This is the way I work in the laboratory. I'll take an idea, treat it like a child, become joyful, happy. But the moment I step into the laboratory, as this will be these 3 days, this is our laboratory, we then must test, critique, and remove the resistance of doubt by experience and understanding. So that is the thing. So we're going to work together, remove as much as possible the resistance to the understanding of what we are doing. And through that, we come to a feeling of joy, happiness, and unfolding. Now, Kurt, let's have a meditation. And we will work with my little baby here, 13-sided meditation system. We'll start by sitting up straight, coupling your legs. Breathe in and out. Breathe in. Close your eyes, visualize the crystal, and let your breath out into the crystal. Become one now with the crystal. Feel the vibration of the beauty, the pattern, the force that a crystallographic form has. Let us start now to breathe together. Breathe in and out. With each indwelling breath, release the tension that is in your body and bring it to a sense of peace and harmony. Breathe in, out. Breathe in, peace. and out. Now create in your mind the reason, the purpose of your being here. What you want to know, to experience, and to bring from here and put into practice. Happiness is work minus resistance. What resistance do I have now in my body that I wish to release? Peace to you all. Breathe in. Hold your breath and release yourself now from the crystal. My computer now is here. This means the internal vibrations and feelings of each of you are stored here in this crystal. From time to time, I will pick it up and use it as a transducer to help me to speak to you in a more deep, practical, and meaningful way. Let us start out straightforward. What is a crystal? How many of you have knowledge on crystallography or the science of the growth of crystals? You? So just 3 out of the group. Also, would you like now to have a clearer understanding of a crystal per se, how it grows in nature? A crystal like this is made from a solution in water of silica dioxide, SiO2. 2 atoms of oxygen and 1 atom of silica combine together and they form silica. It is one of the most proliferous elements and materials and compounds we have in nature. For the solution of silica in water to form a single crystal like this, it must do the following set of actions. It must first form in solution what we call a unit cell. Now, a unit cell corresponds almost exactly to a human cell in our body. It is the smallest unit which, when you separate that unit, it loses its identity. Silica now is SiO2, one atom of silica with two atoms of oxygen. SiO. Now that is a molecule of silica dioxide. These are in solution. They move around aimlessly. They have no real identity. When you reduce the percentage or increase the percentage by evaporating the water, these molecules of silicon dioxide associate together, and as they get to a critical dimension, they link and form a unit cell which is hexagonal in shape. This unit cell is the memory unit on which now a crystal will grow. If you do not have that, you cannot get a single crystal. You'll get a precipitation of an amorphous mass, a gel. You take silica, you dissolve it in water by heating it, and you let the water evaporate. You have jelly, a silica gel. Now what that represents are these units of silicon dioxide which link together in random shape. They are not cohesive, they are random, and they therefore have no bond forces holding them together. And so you can stick your finger in the jelly and it is like jelly. It has no strength to it. Now, you take this same silica gel, bring it back into solution, and you cool it slowly, and suddenly out of that solution will precipitate minute crystals. And if you capture one of these crystals, it'll be exactly like this. That is called a seed crystal. S-E-E-D. What you have done by slowly cooling and having the right concentration, you've allowed these molecules of silica in solution to fit together and suddenly find the right combination that they link and form this hexagonal structure. And once you can get that structure, you then have the nucleating site or memory unit on which now crystals can grow. Remarkable thing that we found in our laboratory. We have found, I'm making a big bridge right now, but I want to give it to you at this moment. These type of crystals which you have are memory units. These are composited of millions of these unit cells. And as a consequence, your energy, my energy, can go into this. I can program with my mind a crystal. And what I did, I put the thought of nucleating silica so it would crystallize out of solution properly. So I took and put that into a holder, a special holder we made, and spun water around it, which contained a very dilute solution of silica. And then I took a drop of that, put it under the on a slide, and watched it in the microscope in comparison to the same solution that had not been treated by my mind. The one that I focused my mind on came out in beautiful needles of silicon, single crystals of silicon. Only a few microns long, but perfect. The other side was just a jet, amorphous without order. The implication, please, implication. Your mind, your thoughts can enter matter and order it. Bring a systematic ordering like this into being. And I have done it. It is the most thrilling thing to experience. You can take from random order and by focused attention, bring a systematic ordering into being. That is why we're here. That's what I have given my time to come here to be with, is to learn how to put in systematic order the patterns of life within you so that you start to form and act in a regular, systematic array. You have a seed crystal. You take this seed and put it back in a little string into the solution. And then again you cool it. But now, as that solution flows around that seed, it has a reference electrode to work on. It has an informational source to know what to do, and so each one of these molecules start to link onto that, and they go face by face by face, and they just keep expanding. And they grow layer by layer, and as that expands, you see exactly these angles as you see here. These are called the faces. The end of the crystal is called a termination. So this crystal started here, and it became confused when it was first growing, and that gives you that whitish color, as you see, because the crystal planes grew in random orientation. And so when you see it, you see the random orientation here, and finally they locked in place and started to grow symmetrically and systematically, and that gives you this beautiful, clear, single crystal. In nature, a solution of silica in water is dripped down from a cave. This was attached here, and it flowed over this, and then it extracted it, and it built and built, and it decided now to stop here, and it called now a termination. It says that is enough of growth for this, and I will now finish my growth in life. There is a livingness to a crystal when it grows. You can feel the dynamic vibration to a big crystal. And then it starts to take this face and just terminate because it steps, one step, one crystal unit at a time inward until it terminates here. You go this face, it comes here and it terminates here. Go this face here and it terminates here. These angles, every one of them are exactly the same. You take a goniometer, or you can take a piece of cardboard, cut it up, and you'll find that each one of these angles are exactly the same. They're symmetrical. The symmetry then that you see indicates that there is a symmetrical plan in which these things have accreted from and have grown. This is the termination of the crystal. Now, the crystal, when it grows like this, has an option. It can grow left-handed, turning around the left-handed spiral, or it can grow a right-handed spiral. Which means when these unit cells, they can start here and they can start to spiral around in this way. Because all crystals grow in spirals. All. There is a because you see, when and this in space, one unit cell, it prepares for the next growth for organizing these random molecules in space here, and then they lockstep in and they start to grow around. A crystal, when it grows, absorbs the vibrations of the forces that exist in and around it. So, a natural crystal is a perfect storage library of the geologic forces that have existed throughout its time of growth. It reflects in the internal symmetry of this crystal the forces of nature that were there at that time. Consequently, those who work with natural crystals, we call this a natural crystal that has been taken right from nature and are not cognizant of this or aware of it, will induce in their body the effect of all of these geological imprinting forces. It's a very important series. Hold on, well, I haven't come to that yet. Please, no, look, they said what I'm doing. I'm doing step by step. That means, in the exact way the crystal goes, and above all, what we call the space lattice group imperfections, the latticite imperfections. So when a crystal lattice grows, it will suddenly skip, and that skip forms what we call the slip plane. It will grow imperfectly. It is reflecting in its growth a change or a force that existed in nature. We go deeper. A crystal now, after it's grown this way, can also reflect the magnetic and above all the forces of nuclear radiation. Radiation effects, gamma, alpha, and gamma radiation, X-rays, when they will strike on a quartz crystal like this, will cause the silica atom to be displaced from its lattice side, pushed up, and it creates then a negative ion vacancy. So there is a hole in space created by the radiation. That hole then will absorb light. And you see then a smoky crystal or the smoky quartz. An idea came to me last year at Munich when I spoke to some of you who were here about helping the people who have been exposed to Chernobyl. I got a source of a mine of smoky quartz. I tested this, and I found that when I took natural smoky quartz, placed a radioactive source on it, the energy, the radioactive emanations were stored in the crystal. I could measure that radiation with a Geiger counter, and now I got an inspiration. I said, could I erase that radiation, release it from its lattice? What I did, I have an omega-5 measuring instrument to measure the forces that are within the crystal. I put that into the well, measured the field that was in there. I have on the other side the ability to do color therapy. I put then the crystal that was exposed to radiation in there and then exposed the crystal to red light, around 6,000 angstroms, deep red. The moment I shone the red light onto that crystal, there was an abrupt release of energy. No longer could I detect any radiation in the crystal. When I checked it with the Geiger counter, it was clear. So I had a storage device that could soak up radioactive emanation and release it with red light. The start of a device, a safety device that you and I can wear to protect ourselves from radiation. Now I have a source, a mine we found in California. I was there personally. I helped get these crystals. I have about 200 to 300 pounds of the crystal in my laboratory. Next, we're talking now, first, the forces of nature modifying the growth of the crystal. We're talking the next step, the forces of radiation, X-rays, gamma rays, nuclear forces. Now we'll talk on mechanical forces. In other words, a miner seeing this crystal and taking his hammer and hitting this affects every lattice site and creates a disturbance in that crystal, which held in the hands of a sensitive person who can feel. I have had crystals which were beautiful. Were just a beautiful single crystal. But a sledgehammer and had knocked it from the side of a cave. And that blow created havoc inside the crystal. It still holds. Now, what can you do about it? Crystals, in order for you and I to use them, must be purified. They must be released from all negative radiation. They must be released from all patterns of thought. They must be released from all stresses applied by the act of mining or getting them. We, in our laboratory, take a crystal like this and end up with a form that you see here. Four-sided healing crystal. We do this with diamond saws and diamond laps, and above all, with blood. We sing as we cut these crystals. We give music to the crystal as we're finishing and cutting. Because we want to turn this from something like this into an instrument of service and use for mankind. To clear a crystal from the patterns of thought, the emotions, the tension, the stresses that have been imposed on it, including and above all the distress of the tearing away from its root here or the blow of a hammer, can be done in a remarkably simple way. The healing force is love. Because the definition in my mind of love is that force which coheres matter. It brings the matter together in a way that it was designed to be. It heals. So a crystal, when it is first to be used, must be healed. And so the act of healing is to hold a crystal like this between this finger or this finger. Lucy mentioned either one of them. And when you hold it this way,
all right, cool. Thanks for
be careful
tuning
on
in
some
for
of
the
these.
last
The
couple of
tips are
hours.
very, very sharp.
Probably got a bit zoned out halfway
So
through, but
I would recommend that you start
catch
by
you
holding
next
it
month, same time.
this way. So with a pair of faces, you hold here, and you take them to another tip. Tips, hold it here. Draw your breath in. Create an image of well-being and love. It's also it's always good. And the next pair of faces. Hold your breath. The crystal now is stresses, tensions, the moment of its birth. All the struggles that it has gone through has now been released. It is healed, ready for you. Check this out as I have. I don't have my laboratory here. Probably the next time I come, we have further instrumentation. Omega and other people, where you can see the tremendous change that takes place in this crystal. When you put God, love, and well-being into it. Empty the crystal of a charge by creating two oscillating fields, one going in this direction, the other going in this direction. Now, the moment you empty the crystal of the charge, the next step you want to do is to fill it. So you fill by holding it in your hand, the way I have now. Forefinger here, thumb and the middle finger here. Hold, see how I have it? Draw my breath in. Tune to the crystal. As I fill my breath, I keep filling and filling and filling. I'm still drawing my breath in as I'm talking to you. Fill this whole upper cavity. You want to fill, not the stomach. It's a 4-step level to breath, and we'll cover that tomorrow. Start here on the diaphragm. You start filling here until you fill these outer cavities, and this is where the power comes, right here, here and here. Once that is in, watch. See, notice I went up, my body went up and it went down. I impacted a power, a force. I just did it. It was not. It was a whole vital transfer of charge. You follow? Once the crystal is filled, it's yours now. Now it becomes personal. Now it is you. And truly you. Your signature, your life signature is in this crystal. It is a dynamic, living activity or representation of the activities going on in and around your subtle body. It is more than that. You can study yourself at all levels of consciousness through this crystal now. The impact, the statements I am making to you are enormous. I cannot finish in my lifetime the doors that I see opening from a systematic study of these words I'm giving now to you. I cannot, and I will not open too many doors for myself. I want to do a few well and lay a solid ground and then pass it on to the next generation. We have needed an instrument to study ourselves. Man, in his human body, is continually, dynamically changing. You're changing. Every movement of your mouth creates a change in there. So how can I study it? I would have to develop a dynamic instrument to study you. You follow me? And now if I want to study now your brain wave activity, I put electrodes on with electrode paste, take it to an electroencephalograph, look at the alpha, the beta, the theta wave or delta wave activities. But I'm only getting this point. Follow me? This electrode and this electrode through this electrode material into this equipment. I'm not getting the whole picture. I want to study the auric activity of my body. So I take a galvanic skin response machine called GSR. It measures the change in electrical resistance in the tissue here. But I'm measuring this, and that's all. See, the real problem, it is so completely, severely limited. I want to measure the activity of the heart. So I use what we call a blood plethysmograph. So I take a finger here and I wrap it up and have a little light emitting diode and then measure the activity of my heart here. But it's not here. You follow what I'm saying to you?
How's it going? Thanks for joining me. So covering the numbers that you see on a clock, what I see is something like this. I see on a digital clock there's the two dots, which is like the conscious and the subconscious. It's one electron bounced by a positron. It's a light hole being eaten by a black hole through the Holy of Holies. It's that the biophotons of your mother and the biophotons of your father come together to trap you here on the gridiron, and you're brought to life by way of the sun. And now that you're here, the black sun beneath your feet is bringing all your intent into fruition. So when you see the clock, I see the conscious and the subconscious. I see the sine wave. I see the checkerboard. I see that it's every number and every letter is in the sine wave. That we are inside of a living creature right now. And the numbers are conscious. You see the X right there, the X's and O's that you put down, I love you, like X's and O's, hugs and kisses that you put down at. What they're telling you here is that you're inside of a living conscious being. And you have the symbols. It's where attention goes, energy flows, and symbols are the language of the universe and the conduit that your biomorphic energy is flowing through. Okay? Now, everything you speak is a magic spell. You learn spelling or spellcasting in school. And your own blood is spiritual currency. Now, when you lost your virginity, you lost your divinity. That's why they sacrifice virgins, because their blood is pure. So what I did is I spilled my blood over my intent to be bringing forth heaven on earth, and I published the video to my channel on YouTube. And what happened was I restored this high man, something I lost when I lost my virginity. This high being that's inside of all of us that allows us to see what nobody else can see. For example, okay, this is exactly what you're living on right now. And when you set up a Christmas tree every year, it's showing you your doorway to everlasting life is where every compass points to. It's literally right over there at the end of your compass. But you can't see this. You think I'm crazy for telling you something like that, but it's been rubbed in your face since day one. And for whatever reason you can't see it. That's because you need to restore your high man so that you can look down upon things from like the heavens above and see things as they really are. And alright, so you have odd numbers, which are masculine. You know, you set up a sundial, which is like a phallus. You say fucking A, and I say no, fuck a B, it's got two holes. Alright? You see, it's the fire above your head, and that you're birthed out of your mother's waters. Alright? So, when I see the clock, I see this subconscious, conscious. I see this one electron balanced by a positron. I see a masculine, a feminine. Okay? This is how you have to read things. Alright? So, getting into the numbers, let's see. What you should understand is that the number symbol is one cross up, one cross down. You walk into a church, you place the holy feminine water on your forehead, you kneel down to the feminine, like, you know, like when you ask a woman to marry you, you kneel down. And then you do this upside down cross on your head when you go into church. You go from your head to your chest, left to right. Okay? And you see the 11. This is like the 7 is the L upside down. And you see the L even. And if you turn that 90 degrees to the right, you'll see that the 1, like 101, is like the Father in heaven winking at you, telling you he's got an eye on you. And the 808 is like this divine mother spirit winking at you, telling you she has her eye on you. You should learn how to reduce numbers down to a single digit. So if it's like 3, 3, you reduce it down to 6. If it's 3, 2, you reduce it down to 5. What I'm saying is that the numbers are conscious. It's that the biophotons your mother and the biophotons your father come together and trap you here on the gridiron. You're brought to life by way of the sun. Okay? Now your DNA is one thing, but it's a double helix. You have the 3 letters of DNA and then the CTAG, which in reverse is green ash trailing charge, which is coming out of the Holy of Holies at the center of the dish, where every compass points to. It's hitting the parabolic mirror and showering down on us. In a previous age, there was big giant trees that spread out across the earth, like in the movie Avatar, and the whole place would have glowed just like they showed you in that movie. So your DNA, this is like a 4-letter code. You look at a digital clock, it's got 4 numbers on it. What I'm telling you, this is the 4-faced, 4-letter DNA God that's talking to you directly. So the 4s and the 7s, this is like the 2-ball cane. So when you see 007, like 7 o'clock, this is the 2-ball cane. It's one side of a light hole is a black hole. And like you go into a church, you block out the sunlight with the stained glass windows that focus everybody's intent onto the black sun. So the sun above your head is making your flesh, your bones, and your blood. And now that you're here, the black sun is what's bringing your intent into fruition. This is a living, conscious being, and symbols of the language of the universe and the conduit that your biomorphic field is flowing through. So let's see. Going over some numbers here. I recommend you type into your computer when this video is done secret meanings of numbers and learn all you can. But some basic stuff you need to understand is that repeating numbers like 111, 222, 333 are telling you stay the course, hold position, you're on track, this type of thing. 1, 2, 3, 4 is your ducks are lining up. You're on course, you're on track. If the numbers are going the opposite direction, like 6, 5, 4, 5, 4, 3, 4, 3, 2, that's telling you slow down. Okay? Hold position, that type of thing. Now you see the 101, that's like the God the Father in heaven winking at you. And this is like the Mother 808 winking at you. 0 is the biggest number in the universe. It has all the positives and all the negatives. It's like a Vesica Pisces. It's stretched out. It's like an eye. And what I'm telling you is that like the 707, the 606, the odd numbers are masculine, the even numbers are feminine. You put a 5-pointed star on a 5-star general to go out and do battle or something like that. So what I'm telling you is like the 444, the 333, the 222, the 111. These are masculine, feminine type of things. You could you could reduce numbers down to a single digit, like 1, 2, 3, 4 would be like 7, 8, 9. That's 10 right there, and 10 is like a phallus going into a vagina, because the 0 is like a Vesta Pisces, it's stretched out, right? So the basic stuff you want to understand is that numbers going up, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, that your ducks are lining up, you're on track, that type of thing. 654 is telling you slow down, pause or something like that, take a look around. Repeating numbers are telling you you're on track, stay the course, hold position, this type of stuff. And if there's a 0 in there, like 101, 808, 202, these types of things, okay, what you want to do is type into your computer the meanings of numbers, and then write down like a thing, like what each number means, so that you can, understand the best you can about numbers. That's what I recommend. And this is going to help you out, knowing like master numbers and stuff like that. Okay, and learning the meanings of all these different numbers, but just the basic stuff that you're going to want to learn is stuff like this. So I see the 1001, and that's like both your eyes are open, you can see, or there's God telling you He's got His eyes on you, both eyes on you. Okay, the 10 o'clock, the 0 is the biggest number of the universe. It's like a reinforcer. It has all the numbers of the universe, all the positives and all the negatives. It's like a Vesta Pisces is stretched out. So this is a very powerful symbol when you see the 10 o'clock. You see the 1010, that's like the opposite of the 1001. Like both your eyes are open, and the 1010 is like your cross. But there's a positive and negative to each number. So, yes, you can. Maybe it's telling you yes, you can see, but you can see something that's not very cool. Or the 1010. What I'm saying is that symbols are the language of the universe, and the conduit that your biomorphic energy is flowing through. You will get up and at a specific time, you will drink your coffee at a specific time, eat breakfast at, humans are creatures of habit. And the numbers don't lie. Okay? Numbers are conscious. I'm telling you, the clock is connected to this greater earth spirit. And if you want to connect to this spirit, maybe you place your bare feet on dry soil, drop a drop of your blood into the dirt, and ask the Great Spirit for guidance. And you could do this at daytime or do it at midnight, specifically, because you're connecting with that source energy, either the black sun or the light sun, or one side of a light hole is a black hole. It's the same sun, but there's built into this matrix a conscious awareness that transcends sex, but it has masculine features, or you know what I mean? It's a masculine and a feminine spirit that will help guide you, okay? And when I see like 1-1, like 11-11, This is the 4-phase, 4-letter DNA God, just like the 444. This is like 202. This is this great spirit, this 808. Okay, and you know, like the 707, the 0 is you can take on the 7, and that would be like 777 or 666, which is 6 is a number of bounds. So you could reduce a number like 666. That's 6 is an even number, but 6 times 3 is 18. 8 plus 1 is 9. That's an odd number, and that's like the Fem I9. Okay, talking to you. So look left, look right. That's 1011 or 1101. See, you have the zeros to the left or 0 to the right. That's like look left, look right, choose left, choose right. That's what I see. Okay? So you want to keep this as simple as possible, people. Numbers counting up. Your ducks are lining up. Numbers counting down. Slow the fuck down. Repeating numbers. Hold position. You're on track. That type of thing. 101, that's like a wink or an eye on you. 808, 202, 303, these types of things. Okay, you group like a 3 plus 3 is 6. That's like the feminine talking to you. That's the number of balance. This is what is going to help you start reading the clock. Start looking up the meanings of numbers, what each number means and stuff like that. And write it down, and then you'll start to get used to this type of thing. But what I'm explaining to you is that your clock, your digital clock is talking to you absolutely. And in any case, here I'm giving a shout out. If you type into your computer blood over intent and hit enter, and you scroll down to these channels, see ya at the center. See how it's CENTRE, center dish? Okay? You see all the videos he's making since he spilled his blood over his intent. And you see these other channels making videos also, since they spilled their blood over their intent and published it to the ether. That's a key thing. Okay? In any case, I appreciate you guys watching. I love you. Get to my channel for truth immediately. How are you? Thanks for joining me. So picking up where we left off in the previous video, communicating with God through numbers. We had spoken about the 2 dots on the clock being the subconscious and the conscious. 1 electron bounced by a positron. A light hole and a black hole. It's time going in one direction, time going in the other direction. That is, when you go into the Holy of Holies at the center of the dish, you drink from the living waters, and when you pop out the other side, time is going the other direction for you. You no longer get old. And it's just that simple. So this type of stuff that is rubbed in your face, you can play stupid all you want, but what I'm seeing here is like the checkerboard again, and each square is coded with a number, and these numbers are synthesized to, here, I'm just going to scroll the page for a second here. You know, each number has a particular vibration to it, and when you bring these different numbers into a magic square like this, I think you need to start off with the one that says relaxation. Let me tell you why, because there's so much shit out there, you know, collapse of the dollar, everything's gonna end and stuff like this. This would be good. The end of the world is good. And the end days, that's the best days, because then we start afresh at the Holy of Holies with the center of the dish, getting our drink of everlasting life, and popping out the other side where time is going the other direction for us. It's just that simple, people. And I pointed out that on the clock, you see like the 10:01, you know, when you see this, that's the Father in heaven telling you he's got his eyes on you, or that you can see. And I went over these numbers and whatnot in the previous video. Now we're going to go over the magic squares. So what I see is like the checkerboard again, like I pointed out in the previous video. Your number sign is one cross up, one cross down. You see the 18, that's like a phallus going into a woman with 2 holes. That's like the perfect number, 18. So that's the way this stuff is set up, people. Masculine and feminine. Okay, like you say fucking A and I say no fucking B, it's got 2 holes. They rub this shit in your face. So you can play like, you know, it doesn't make sense to you, but it does. You have the fire above your head, which is the sun, which is the masculine. You set up a sundial, which is like a phallus. And the feminine, you birthed out of your mother's waters. Okay, those are the even numbers. So you have straight lines, which are masculine, curved lines or round lines, which are feminine. Bent lines are confused. So when you graduate from school and you place that thing on your head, you're clearly saying that you're bent and confused, and that you know nothing of truth. You were fed the reverse of truth in all things. I pointed out in previous videos that your symbols have been rubbing all this shit in your face, and you played pin the tail on the Dawn key, like Don the Father who is in heaven. Hallowed be his name. Hallowed because you have to go into the Holy of Holies at the center of the dish to get there. It's very simple. There's no way to fuck this up. Every compass points to it. So, the magic squares, I think you should start up a relaxation for a reason, because everywhere I see people like paranoid, like the whole, at the end of the world. I'm telling you, that's when the end of the world happens, we all head straight for the center of the dish. We get our drink of everlasting life. How's it going? Thanks for joining me. Picking up where we left off in the previous 2 videos, how to communicate with God, and also everything points to flat earth. We'll get into that in a second. Just bear with me, because I have a lot of important information I'm going to show you here. So you see the biophotons your mother and the biophotons your father come together to trap you here on the gridiron. You're brought to life by way of the sun. And now that you're here, well, it was the sun above your head that made your flesh, your bones, and your blood. And now that you're here, you grow up and you want to make something happen in reality. That's the black sun. That was what they kept from you. The black sun is what's bringing your intent into fruition. So, you hear the word black sun and you immediately go into like a freak mode. You start saying satanic and shit like that. Listen, every word you speak is a magic spell. You went to school to learn your Book of the Dead. You took your test with your number 2 shit pencil. You know, you're a witch. You set up your witch hat every year, your Christmas tree, your spear of destiny that pierces the side of Jesus Christ who's on the cross, which is the sun. And you take communion and you're the black sun yourself. You close your eyes and make a wish, blow out the sun above your head, and focus your intent under the black sun. That's a double cross. One cross up, you're hashtag this, hashtag that. You put on a black robe at graduation with a hat that says you're bent and confused. And what I'm telling you is you know nothing of truth. And nobody can tell you any truth because everybody you know is fucking retarded. And hopefully we can set you straight here. You hear Ice Cube and all this shit. You see Popeye with the anchors on his arms. Okay. The black sun is anchored into a cube. So Ice Cube, okay, it's one sun. One side of a light holds a black hole. Alright? So the caduceus, the deuce, like in two, it's the Bible, two balls. You pin the tail on the dawn key. Dawn the Father was in heaven, so hell beneath your feet. You need to go into the hole, the asshole. X marks the spot at the center of the dish. You see the Polaris. The green astral light comes out of that hole and showers down on us. This shit is literally rubbed in our face. So all the letters, all the numbers are right there in the sine wave. You sign on the X. And X is wrong answer. X is a puckered asshole. All the letters, all the numbers are right here in the sine wave. So when you say the Saturn symbol right there is something that's evil, okay, it's set up like that so that you can't co-create. Because now that you're here, anything that you want to create is coming through the black sun. Okay? It's the conscious and the subconscious. And it's the same story over and over again. One side of a light hole is a black hole, the checkerboard. So when I see the clock, I see the sine wave. It's the conscious and the subconscious. It's like a checkerboard. When I see magic squares, I see the checkerboard. If you shade in the odd numbers on magic squares, you'll see images appear. Take a look. Alright. This other magic square over here, you'll see two crosses. One cross up, one cross down. All I did was shade in the odd numbers, and you see the U. You cross. Your cross was originally a cube. When they went from the flat earth plane to a globe, they unfolded the cube into a cross, which is the four sides of the box, then the one that you place on your head when you graduate from school that locks you in the box and keeps you frozen, like pole ice, frozen in your pole, in your head, and you can't see what's hiding in plain sight. I'm telling you that you're living on the checkerboard right now, the chessboard. But there's a hole at the center of the dish. You played pin the tail on the dawn key, Dawn the Father who is in heaven. Alright? When you hear the 2-ball cane, the 700 club, okay. You see Enoch in reverse it's clear, people, okay, that since vowels are interchangeable, You know, you have the ball, you cast your ball it. It's the ball with the 2 A's because it's one side of a light hole is a black hole. Okay, your vowels, it's A-E-I-O-U and sometimes Y. And then there's another hidden vowel, it's W. What the fuck is the chance of that, people? That it was the W, right? A-E-I-O-U and then also the double U. So that makes sense that they hid this type of shit from us because it's telling you right there. We know that we go backwards with our vowel from it's T-U-V. The O represents the Holy of Holies at the center of the dish. X marks the spot, pin the tail on the Don key like Don the Father who is in heaven. Okay? The Holy Grail is right over there. There's absolutely no way to fuck this up. When I see Shiva in the upside down pair, now we know that this symbol is supposed to be upside down. This represents the black sun that's bringing all your intent into fruition. They hide the truth in plain sight. So, we're inside the cube, in the center of the triangle, inside of the circle. This is the entire universe right there, people. Look it up. That's what it is. Alright? And you place your wedding ringer, your wedding ringer is your limp finger, not your fuck you finger. It's telling you that you need to get to the Holy of Holies at the center of the dish before you're dead. And I know this is crazy. I know you don't want to believe it. It's like, how the fuck could this be possible? Well, go watch that guy do that video, Solomon Lost Magic. He said he did the video because somebody was teaching the wrong types of ways to use the 72 spirits trapped in there. Well, it turns out those 72 spirits were charged with teaching you the arts and sciences. Did you hear what I said? Those 72 that they call demons are charged with giving you the arts and the sciences. So, now you know why they've demonized everything. Okay? This right here, you open up the brass box, and this is what I saw, the image. I see the eye at the bottom right over there. So, what I'm seeing here is the masculine, and you see it had the symbol on there, X marks the spot. It had the pin the tail on the donkey symbol over there. What I'm seeing is this phallus. It's this same story over and over and over again. We're inside that crystal ball, okay? And the symbols, people don't even know what the symbols are. When they see them, they're using them, but these are people that are using them, and they still think they're on a globe, okay? Floating through space as an accident. This place is fixed. You're inside of Pandora's box right now, and it's anchored down the black sun. Okay, it has to be fixed so that the green astral jet can come shooting out, hit the parabolic mirror, and shower down on us. So when you see that no force on flat Earth, that's exactly, it's true. There was a highway of information that flowed through this place, and it glowed. The Aurora Borealis would have shot through the veins all the way across the earth, and that's all gone now. There's a Holy of Holies there now, and we need to get there before we're dead to get our everlasting life. That's where we drink from the living waters. This is what I see. Everything's upside down, okay? We need to get to this holy hole before we're dead. So, something that we were talking about in the previous video was relaxation. I think that you should make yourself magic squares like this. Make sure they have triple border. 1, 2, 3. You're capturing the essence of these numbers, their vibration, bringing it into the number symbol, which is 1 cross up, 1 cross down. Just like you walk into a church, you kneel down, and you make an upside down cross on your fucking head. You go from your head to your chest, left to right. That's an upside down cross. You kneel down to the feminine, and then you walk in. You have stained glass windows blocking out the sun above your head and focusing your intent onto the black sun. You close your eyes, make a wish, focus your intent onto the black sun. It's clear. You blow out the candle. That's like the sun above your head. And you focus your intent onto the black sun. So the black sun would be like the subconscious. Okay? And I'm telling you, the numbers don't lie. What you can do is stare at one of these for 5 minutes a day until you remember the pattern. And so that you could do it from memory. And that's what's going to bring it into reality. It's that you need a triple border around it because you're capturing it and bringing it into reality. So like sigil stuff, I've seen people making videos on like sigil magic, but you can see that the people making those videos are fucking retarded, because you're supposed to have a sigil that's mirrored like this, which is where you write out. They tell you to cut out all the vowels. So you write out something like I intend to bring forth heaven on earth and usher in heaven on earth. What they tell you to do is cross out any duplicate letters, and also remove any vowels. A, E, I, O, U. Vowel to L. The Father in heaven. Everybody's got it in their name, like Daniel. Everybody's name is named after the Father in heaven, the L. Okay? Like the L even. So here, they tell you to keep the vowels out. And I'm showing you that you can keep the vowels in. You don't have to have any duplicate vowels, but you're using letters one time in black, mirrored in red, and then triple bordered. And what you do is you make one of these for someone else. You don't make them for yourself. Of course you could, but it's like the division symbol. One side of a light hole is a black hole. You need to make it up and down. You're a stand-up guy, right? Okay, you're a stand-up type of guy. So the green astral light comes shooting out of the hole, hits spirit. This is the infinite potential. Okay? The king's most powerful magic was he wrote stuff down, bringing it from the imaginary into this realm by writing it onto papyrus or chiseling it into stone. This was the king's most powerful magic. The key is to bring it from the imaginary and into the physical realm. Then you need to capture the idea with the triple border, because this is like the 3D, right? D is the fourth letter, like the four corners right there. Okay? You're capturing it. Like the four corner rule. It's what I'm saying is that it's exactly like this because it's one side of a light hole is a black hole. And for you to keep time to just get to work or something like this, everything needs to be free. Whatever luxury there is, it needs to be for everybody. And we need to get our drink of everlasting life from the Holy of Holies out of the center of the dish. Alright? This place you're living is far more exciting once you understand that numbers and symbols have a deeper meaning. There's a whole bunch of magic squares that you could be putting together and giving to other people, like your children.